In December 1942, 13 British commandos were sent on a mission their own commanders quietly believed most of them would not survive. They weren't given heavy weapons, they weren't given air support, they weren't even given a guaranteed way home. Instead, they were handed fragile wooden kayaks and ordered to paddle nearly 70 miles up a freezing, enemy-controlled river straight into one of the most heavily guarded ports in Nazi-occupied Europe. If they were captured, execution was almost certain. And yet, every man volunteered. This was Operation Frankton, a mission built on silence, endurance, and sacrifice, and one that would become one of the most harrowing special operations of the Second World War. By late 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic was turning deadly for the Allies. German U-boats and blockade runners were still slipping supplies through occupied Europe, and one port in particular had become a lifeline for the Nazi war machine, Bordeaux. The harbor was deep, well-defended, and filled with valuable cargo ships supporting German operations across the Atlantic, but there was a problem. The Allies couldn't bomb it. Heavy bombing would have destroyed the city and killed civilians, and German air defenses made precision attacks nearly impossible. Every attempt to neutralize Bordeaux from the air had failed or caused unacceptable damage. So British planners began considering something far more dangerous. If bombs couldn't reach the ships, then men would have to. Not soldiers landing with rifles, not paratroopers dropping from the sky, just a handful of commandos paddling in silence. But what came next shocked even hardened military planners.
The volunteers came from the Royal Marines' small-scale raiding force, a unit designed for missions most others wouldn't take. They weren't famous. They weren't elite celebrities of the war. Most were young men who had never been tested like this before. Leading them was Major Herbert Blondie Hasler, calm, precise, and painfully aware of the odds. There were no speeches about glory, no promises of medals. They were told the truth. The kayaks were fragile. The river patrols were constant. The cold alone could kill them. And if captured, German orders were clear. Commandos were not to be treated as prisoners of war. They would be executed. No one was forced to go. Not a single man stepped back. But agreeing to the mission was only the beginning.
The kayaks they trained with were called cockles, folding, canvas-covered boats designed for stealth, not survival. They were slow, unstable, and nearly impossible to control in rough water. Training took place in freezing Scottish lochs, where men learned to paddle for hours without speaking, without lights, without leaving a trace. They practiced placing limpet mines by touch alone, underwater, in darkness, knowing one mistake could trigger an explosion inches from their hands. They learned to hide by day, burying themselves in mud and reeds while enemy patrols passed nearby. Every session pushed their bodies further. Cold, numbed fingers, salt, cracked skin. Exhaustion became constant. And hovering over everything was one unspoken truth. This was not training for survival. It was training for endurance until the mission was finished. Then came the night of departure. On December 7, 1942, the submarine HMS Tuna surfaced near the mouth of the Gironde estuary. The sea was rough, the wind unforgiving, and the water painfully cold. One by one, the kayaks were assembled on the submarine's deck and lowered into the black water. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong. Waves slammed into the cockles. One kayak capsized. Another was damaged beyond repair. Men were thrown into freezing water, fighting hypothermia before the mission had even begun. Some were forced to turn back. Others disappeared into the dark. Within hours, the operation was unraveling, but the remaining commandos pressed on, fewer in number, already exhausted, paddling toward enemy territory. The Germans had no idea they were coming. Not yet. For night after night, the men paddled upriver in total silence. By day, they hid, wedged into muddy banks, buried beneath reeds, barely breathing as German patrol boats passed within yards of them. Searchlights swept the water. Engines roared overhead. Any movement could mean death. The cold never left them. Hands bled, muscles locked. Sleep came in minutes, not hours. Food ran low. Strength faded. They began to fall behind schedule, dangerously behind. Every delay increased the chance of discovery, and yet they kept moving, because turning back meant the mission and the sacrifices already made would be meaningless. Then, against all odds, they reached Bordeaux. Under cover of darkness, the remaining kayaks slipped into Bordeaux harbor. Towering German ships loomed above them, silent, massive, unaware. The Commandos moved with practiced precision. One by one, they attached limpet mines beneath the waterline, cold metal against cold steel. No alarms, no gunfire, no mistakes. Timers were set, and just like that, they were gone. Hours later, explosions tore through the harbor. German ships were damaged or disabled. The mission had succeeded. But success came with a terrifying realization. There was no extraction, no submarine waiting, no boats coming back. Now the men had to escape, on foot, through occupied France. German forces reacted fast. Roadblocks were thrown up. Patrols flooded the countryside. The Gestapo joined the hunt. One by one, commandos were captured, cold, exhausted, betrayed by chance or circumstance. They were interrogated, and then, following Hitler's commando order, they were executed. Not as soldiers, not as prisoners of war. Their courage was met with silence, no headlines, no public acknowledgement. For most of them, the mission ended there, but 2 men were still free. Major Hassler and Marine Bill Sparks refused to surrender. With help from French civilians who risked everything, they moved from safe house to safe house. They walked by night, hid by day, trusted strangers who could have betrayed them. Weeks turned into months. They crossed occupied France on foot, evading patrols, surviving on scraps, carrying the weight of everyone who hadn't made it. Eventually, they reached neutral Spain, and finally, impossibly, returned to Britain. They were the only ones who could tell the full story. Operation Frankton destroyed enemy ships and disrupted German supply lines. By military standards, it was a success. By human standards, it was devastating. 13 men went in. Only 2 came home. For years, their story remained quiet, overshadowed by larger battles and louder victories. But their courage reshaped special operations forever. They proved that silence could be a weapon, that sacrifice could change the course of war, and that some of the greatest acts of heroism happened far from cameras and far from applause. They were called the Cockleshell Heroes, and their story was never meant to be forgotten.